Hello, welcome back to BlenderSushi live noding. In this video, I'm going to revisit kind of the previous tutorial where I was doing this 2D painting, and I was also using animation nodes and spread chalk, and together with Blender timeline, which I keep calling just like the touch bar of Apple. I'm gonna revisit that idea, but try to make it simpler. And instead of using 2D paint, I will be using 3D paint. 2D, especially I will be using the Vertex Color instead of using the UV and all kind of mapping. I want to make this really simple. If there is one thing in Blender as a 3D software that I think the simplest to use and kind of but also really powerful is I think it's the 3D paint. I remember back then when I was learning Blender, and I found that Blender Vertex Paint is really kind of simple and intuitive compared to other 3D package. I kind of fall in love with it right away. So let's have a look. So the vertex painting is a one method you can kind of directly color an object instead of using materials or other method. If you ever if you're like beginner Blender users and then you switch to at some point you switch to vertex paint and you realize, hey, I can actually paint this object like that, and then you are probably wondering why is this guy doesn't have much resolution to paint. That's because of course the reason being that this object only have 8 vertices. You need to have more resolutions for that. And let's delete this cube and start again. So start with a new cube, and I switch to wireframe. We can see it's only have 8 vertices, and if you want to do the vertex paint, we need to have more than that, more resolutions. And the way to do that, the quickest way is to give it a subdivision surface, and instead of cut mold Clark, which gonna give like a smooth kind of result, we can switch to simple, and let's increase it more, 4 or 5. I think it's a good start. So let's switch back, and then let's try back to vertex paint and start painting, and it's still the same result. That's because we need to apply this, so just apply it. Now this object has more resolutions, and we can paint it more like this is kind of like just like you would expect if you want to paint, even though you can see there's it's still kind of low resolutions. You can increase the resolution furthermore, but this is fine for our demo. So the idea is just, this should be really simple. I want to play around with the color and the radius and the strength again using animation nodes or spread chalk. First, I want to explain that if you switch from vertex paint and back to object mode, you realize that you don't have that vertex color anymore. There are 2 ways to get it back and to be able to render it out. It's by using, if you are in the Blender internal render, like the default, if you turn on material and then turn on vertex color paint and you render it out, it should render. Okay, that's one way to do it, but we want to instead using Blender cycles. And if you use cycles for a while, you know that in order to bring the vertex color data into the object, you need to do it in the material. In the viewport, I don't think you can see the vertex color. Material, yeah, I don't think you can see it. Let's test it anyway. Let's go to compositing, and then for this object's material, we need to assign a material first and switch to a material panel, and we need to add attribute node, Let's name it 3D Paint 001. We need to assign the vertex color name. In this case, by default, it's named Col. Plug in the color into that guy. Now it should be, if we render it out, it should be giving us the result that we expect. Currently, it's using like a diffuse material. It needs light, and currently we do have light, and then we can see the result. But for what we are doing, we really don't need light. And if we render now, it should be black if we turn off the light fully, like in the world. Check it out. Sorry, now it's fully black. What we really want is just instead of using diffuse material, let's use emission. Plug the color in and into the surface. Now we have just the objects with a with a vertex paint that we painted earlier. So this is kind of the setup that I want to work with. It's supposed to be a really simple video tutorial. It's for beginner actually. For beginner that wants to learn a little bit of coding, a little bit of noding, and you're using Blender, and it's really cool. It's gonna be fun. So like I said, painting in 3D is really fun. It's not intimidating at all, and it's one thing that everyone should teach to beginner Blender user, because they oftentimes they just wanna have like a 3D objects and they just want to paint on it. It's a almost kind of like meditative sometimes. Because if you compare it with other kind of activity you can do in Blender, like modeling or animating, you need to do rigging, and the animating part can be fun when you see the result and it's working, but it gets tedious as well. Same thing with modeling, sculpting, it gets tedious. But I think the texturing, the 3D paint is actually the most fun. I think it's using less of your technical brain, but more on a creative side. There is a lot in the 3D paint itself. It actually is very similar to 2D paint. We're just gonna touch coloring. I don't think we're gonna touch the texturing and masking or something. We will see. So painting. Okay, you can do painting, and what else before I forgot? So yeah, just do like random painting, and then you know that's because you're working on a 3D cube. That's what you're gonna get. A cube with a colored vertices like that. But I think to make it more fun, I will be using Teapot, just like the Pixar logo Teapot. We have Teapot in Blender, and then by default we also can give it more resolution. So we're gonna do that because we're gonna do vertex painting. So 11 should be pretty good, maybe 12. Okay, we're gonna use the Teapot, and then we also wanna create another objects, extra objects. Teapot actually have another form, which is a spoon. I wish they also provide one more thing. It's maybe like a teacup, teapot and teacup and spoon. That should be nice. We can use the same material that we apply to the cube for both, and then let's switch again to Vertex Paint and start painting again. Okay, that seems to be working. we can only work on I think we can only work on one object at a time, so we need to switch to the spoon and then Vertex Paint and then do some painting. So one by one, and then once you're done, you're in object mode. You cannot see the result, unfortunately, unless you render it out. So yeah, that's quite nice. If you want to get the diffuse back, you can always do that. You know, just create diffuse or other material and then plug it in and turn on the light a little bit. Instead of using environment light, use proper light. Sorry, I'm doing this like twice just to be very clear. So now it's more like a 3D again. Let's smooth this once again. Shade smooth. Just now I was tapping spacebar and then typing shade smooth. Okay, let's do some painting and using animation nodes or spray chalk. Let's start with spray chalk first, and I will have probably create a text editor right here. Just to be very clear, I will use the teapot. Put the spoon somewhere else. Make it a really big spoon, that's okay. Teapot, let's switch to Vertex Paint and let's focus our attention to this panel. Let's save this. So this is the defaults of the brush. You can give any color, and I believe this is for the brightness. It's not for opacity, and the strength is like the opacity is 1 maximum by default, and there is also radius for the brush. Normal stuff. You can like in the previous live noding, I told you that it's kind of nice if we have like a touch bar or something we can kind of access all the time. And my proposed solution is to use the timeline, because when you're painting you don't really use timeline, I don't think. But using the timeline you can easily control the brush size, for example, or maybe the color of the brush. So let's try with the brush size first. Instead of, you might be painting, right? Painting and then I want to make the brush size smaller. I wonder if there is actually a shortcut to do that. Maybe, yeah, the shortcut is actually in the menu here. It says scale sculpt brush size. It's that bracket kind of thing. Let's try. Yep. Yeah, apparently that's the shortcut. Of course, I guess that's you either remember the hotkey for the brush or you're using the timeline thing. Anyway, I'll be using the timeline thing for now. I'll make the timeline smaller and make the range between 1 and 100. Even though we have the shortcut here, I will still gonna show it to you using the timeline. Okay, just because you will be learning something new, like Python, deep Blender Python, and a little bit of kind of connecting one value over another value. So radius, if we right click and then copy data path and paste it, it says tool settings, unified paint settings. It's not so useful in this case. Let's have a look at if we are changing the radius. Let's have a look up here. Supposedly I can drag it up from the top. There you go. PPY context scene tool settings, unified painting setting size 26, which is basically the same thing, but this one gives you access directly to the BPY, the Blender command. Blender context scene tool settings, unified paint settings. I wonder if we can just plug it in. Let's create a new sphere node 3 and then use the set property. and let's paste that in. It's giving an error because this is not what we want. We don't want the equal 26. We just want that this is the address to the size of the brush. Let's change this to 5, and then let's see. Doesn't seem to be changing. If I'm using Control Option Shift Command Shift C and paste it, BPY data scenes, this is actually more correct, the one, this guy. So this is what we want to use instead of context scene. We always want to access the data directly instead of using the context scene tool settings. So I'm gonna copy this one. The way I get this again, if I hover over the attributes, Command Alt Control Shift C in Mac, and then paste, you get this, and it's accessing the current data scene, the tool settings. Yeah, I think this is more correct, and just paste it there. It's not, seems to be working, but the weird thing is that we also have this BPY ops scale size. That's probably what we want. BPY ops brush scale size. So we need to use the ops. And for ops stuff, we probably need to use just I'm gonna use animation nodes for that. I don't want to make this too complicated actually. So we're gonna use this inside a script node of animation nodes. Script node, and select the, create a new script and then paste it just down there. So this is our script. Let's just paste this guy there. And let's create our node, my script. So it's running the script each time. This is very dangerous. Let's turn it off. We want it to just change when we change the frame. Okay, so whenever I hit the arrow, it's gonna run this command. I believe we should get what we want now. Yeah, whenever I run this, it's kind of changing the brush size. BPY ops brush scale size. I wanna BPY ops brush scale size. Let's turn it off. Switch back to 1, 2, and then somehow this command seems to be scaling the brush, make it smaller or bigger each time, which is not what we want. We kind of want to have like a direct access to the size or the radius. Maybe it's called size instead of scalar. Size 5. Kind of guessing. Unrecognized. Maybe radius. No, it's not recognized. I have to find it. BPY ops brush size. Or maybe it's in here. Instead of scale size, it should be another command. Let me check real quick. BPY ops brush. Scale size, scalar. Change brush size by scalar. Sculpt tool size. Weird. Really weird. I think let me try using this then. BPY context scene tool. So I'm gonna copy this. Paste it there. Okay, I think this will work in animation nodes. I don't know why it didn't work on Spreadshop. So BPY context scene tool settings unified paint setting size is actually working. Okay, and we need to give it an input. In this case, it's gonna be integer. And by changing this, we should also be changing this guy, hopefully. Okay, this is gonna be our brush size, or just call it size, and put it here. And let's reset. Okay, seems to be working now. If we change the size in here, it's also changing the one on the screen. Okay, phew, that's good. Sorry, I make this a little bit complicated at first. So the idea is to be controlling all this color and radius and strings using animation nodes or Spreadshop, and seems to be. I'll just use animation nodes. It seems to be working as expected. So we can still change color over here or change the radius here, and we can also change it here and still working. The plan is to use the frame number to change the size of the brush. That's actually the plan from the very beginning. So here I'm using the arrow keys and I'm changing the brush size. Yeah, we've seen that. I showed this before in the previous live noding, and it's for 2D painting, but now we are doing it in 3D again. Okay, we can change the size. Good. How about the color? Okay, let's do the color as well. The nice thing about animation nodes that it has this color, combined color nodes. Give you the options like RGB, HSV, RGB red, green, blue, HSV hue saturation value, and HSL, etc. You can use any of these. We can try one by one. We cannot just plug this into our nodes because it's a color, but this brush is expecting just a RGB, 3 color value. Color is 4 different value, HSV and alpha. The alpha should actually be plugged into the strength. So we can kind of hack it or find a way around it. New input color. If we say color, that means 4 value, so that's we can actually plug in there. And then for this color to affect our brush, we need to make a little bit we need to type a little bit of Python here. Let's grab the color data, Command Alt Option Shift C, and paste it here. BPY data brushes draw color equal something. The color is actually should be just 3 value RGB. So I'll make like a little bit of kind of commenting here. This one will change the brush size, and this guy will change brush color and change brush strength. Later we're gonna do that. Here we're gonna kind of separate brush, separate color, because we're piping in this 4 value. Okay, so we actually have 4 different value that we can put in. I rename the variable my color, and here I will tell it get my color and assign it to RGBA. Update. Now it should be working correctly. And the brush strength, which is this guy, I want it to be affected by the the alpha. So I'm gonna grab this data path and then paste it here. Not like that. Command Alt Control Shift copy, paste it. Strength equal alpha. Okay. Now I think it should be working properly. RGBA, we can assign different value, and alpha is affecting the strength of the brush. Okay. So this is a red color, green, red and green, we get yellow and blue, and we can change it to HSV. By default it's 1000, which is gonna give us black color. We don't want that. Maybe give it a value of 1 to all of them. Now we are actually getting red because a hue of 1 is red and 0 is also red. But what's in between is gonna give us kind of like a circular. It's gonna go around the spectrum of color. It's all also affected by the saturation and the value. And this is a color. Then once we have this kind of setting, the cool thing about this setup is that we can assign any kind of data. We can plug in any kind of floating value data into the hue, so we can have like a color that keep changing, maybe based on a frame. Let's try that. Frame, plug into the hue. If we try, hey, it's changing the brush size, and also it's also try to change the color, but it's keep giving us the same color, red. Because frame goes from 1, 2, 3. You know, it's a big. It's not a floating. We need to use math here and then give it a smaller value, like maybe 0.005 even. Now if we go through the frame, the color is changing each time. This is exactly my plan. Kind of a way to change the color of the brush using time. Currently we are using both. We are kind of piping the time into the color and the brush size radius. So we either cut it for now, give it a brush size of 20, and then let's change the color. Just play around with the brush for now. It's currently being controlled by the time frame. So if I actually play back this scene, so instead of instead of using this tiny time frame, I'm gonna create another one over here, timeline, and then I will play back. So now it's playing back, and while playing back you can do like a random kind of color. It's kind of rainbow color. It's going through the spectrum. You can also still change the saturations to have more or less saturations and the value. It's really fun. It's like I said, this is quite meditative. Sometimes you just want to relax and paint 3D objects. You know, you don't want to do anything else, and you know that at some point you can stop this and then look at the result, render result, and it looks quite nice. You can change the material back to emissions, so that's the final result. You can also paint while rendering if you're really keen on that. Normally we work in the Vertex Paint and just paint, you know. There's one teapot you have colored, create another teapot, and back to Vertex Paint, and then just start painting. Sometimes we have like this kind of artifacts. It's painting the whole thing like that. It's really fast, but there's like a small artifact, like you just need to get closer to it and do the painting like that, because there are the details. Just ask any person using 3D, using Blender for the first time. You need to teach them this, teach them how to do painting. It's a lot of fun. Again, let's have a look at this thing again. Back to animation nodes. Let's have a look at our setup at the moment. So we have HSV, and we can use a frame number for the HSV. Okay, we can also use random. Let's use random vector or random number. Random number. Let's say. Plug in the frame into the seed, and if we run it, the random number will give a random value for our colors. You see how the color changing is more erratic. Now it's more random. So let's paint again. It's really super fun. At this stage, really totally up to you how you want to make this into art, because you're basically creating 3D art here. Let's stop this and let's have a look at the result. Rendered. You have two teapot colored randomly. Okay, you can be a little bit more you can do it differently. You can paint this, just use think of an idea. Maybe we, instead of changing the color all the time, we want to kind of changing the brush size. Let's try that. So you want a random brush size each time. We can do that using the random number. So random number, give it a color. Brush size between 5 and 2. Plug this into the seed and the number into the size. Okay, let's give it a go. Switch to Vertex Paint. Let's see. Give it a white color paint. There is actually extra paint kind of option here, yeah, that you can apply to the teapot, like inverting the color. And there's also leveling. You can change the color by using the level, gain, and offset. You can also just set the vertex color. It's gonna paint it using current color of your brush. Paint the whole thing. It's actually, the shortcut is Shift K if you want to remember that. And there's also dirty vertex color. Dirty vertex color will give you it's kind of dirty out your vertices. If you're in the black, And dirty vertex color give you see the white part. If you have like red color and give like a dirty vertex color, oh, actually let's paint this using white once again. Set vertex color so it's white, and then dirty vertex colors, it makes our objects kind of dirty. If we actually invert it, now we can see that our objects kind of dirty around the edge. That's what a dirty color does. It gives more realism to our objects. So we can work with that. For simplicity, I will use a grid real quick. Grid or torus? Let's use grid. Grid have a bunch of vertices. Actually none. I'm gonna subdivide this real quick. Subdivide a couple of times so we have more resolutions. And now, okay, we have that ready. Now we can do vertex painting. Turn off the wireframe. Okay, now I want to do like a kind of dot kind of pattern. Let's play back and check if our brush is changing size. Yeah, this is exactly my plan. So let's paint this again using white. Set vertex color. Now we have kind of white. Okay, white color, white canvas. Playback and then start making dots. If there is this Japanese artist name, her name is Yayoi Kusama, and she have this kind of obsession with dots. Whenever I make this kind of dot paintings, always remind me of her. How old is she now? Maybe 70 or more. There's also this comic character. I don't know what's her name. Maybe Dots, Dottie or something. The same character in the world of Casper and Richie Rich. This character have obsession with dots. This is kind of thing that you can also apply to the teapot. Okay, let's switch to the teapot. Let's stop the playback for now. Let's see what we got for now. Okay, we have this dirty teapot. That's okay. Let's assign material to this grid. The same materials and then check in the rendered. Okay, we have that result. Very nice. You can continue on, you know. Maybe it's a spoon. Maybe for the spoon we're gonna make a random dots. Oh, actually no. I'm gonna do it with a teapot. Make another teapot. Switch to vertex paint. Set color to white and then Shift K. I'm getting a white teapot. Now I'm gonna turn on our animation nodes, script nodes, and we're gonna paint the teapot using dot. See, I made a mistake there. I shouldn't paint anything in the corner. It's gonna give that artifact. Let's stop this real quick. Maybe our resolution is not enough. We can always increase the resolution. Subdivision, cut more Clark. Okay, that's pretty good. Apply. Now we have more density of our mesh. Now we can do painting. Turn off wireframe and playback. I'm gonna do the random dot pattern again. This is probably actually a little bit slow at the moment. If you want it a little bit faster, you switch to 3D Viewful. And in 3D Viewful, you don't have the nodes, and then you can do painting much faster. Less lag, but you see the animation nodes is doing it real fast. For every frame, it's kind of running the script for us. This dot is kind of tiny. Let's stop this and back to the compositing. Make the brush size maybe between 20 and 60 and switch back to 3D Viewful. Now we're getting to the pace of this, and we can do it a little bit faster. So you can paint this teapot using dot pattern. This is definitely fun and meditative. Once again, be careful, like I said, when you're painting, you need to paint it straight. Don't paint it like in the corner like that, you're gonna give it artifact. But yeah, like I said, there is no rule, so just feel free to do whatever. You can zoom out and kind of shoot out this paint. You can zoom in and have more precision. You see, there's some kind of artifact again. Maybe there's a way to get rid of that artifact, but for now, I think the solution is just work a little bit closer, and then just do a stipple. I believe you don't actually need to do this kind of clicking. You can enable stroke spacing. Let's try. There you go. That's what I want. Although maybe the way it was designed, if you're doing it like this, when you're painting, you're not changing the color. When you're like stippling, maybe turn on jitter. No, still the same. You still need to do like a clicking to update the brush color. Smooth stroke, input sample, space, dots. There's dots here. Airbrush. Yeah, airbrush also it's not changing the color. Dots. Space. I think space is what we want. It's changing the color and radius. You can also change the blend and lighten. Let me try. Is there a dodge here? Lighten is kind of dodge, so that's you really have a lot of control over the brush painting. It's almost like if you're using Photoshop, but in 3D. This is much better. You can also, of course, use texture. Like let's stop this and back to compositing. If I create like a texture and new and use a cloud, for example, this cloud, and then we assign it to this, and then we start painting. I think it's using the cloud. Switch back to mix. Oh yeah, so it's doing the cloud. It's giving like a black cloud. I believe you can change it to different color. It's kind of doing it. See, it's with the texture, it's already like a different kind of artwork you can create. If we switch to object mode, let's create another teacup. Let's check our results so far. So we have a bunch of teapot, updating mesh PVH teapot. Okay, let's get back to this guy. Apparently this teapot is quite dense, and so it takes time to calculate it. Switch back to Vertex Paint and let's reset the color. Shift K. Let's don't worry about the texture. Get rid of it. Tile, angle, spacing. I think we touch on that. Curve and history. We can set this to maximum. So to get that kind of effects, like solid kind of effects, switch back to original. Maybe this one. Okay, what else I can show to you? HSL. Let's, instead of using HSV, let's use HSL. Saturation Lightness Alpha. These give like a different result. Hue, saturation, lightness, similar to HSV. Why IQ is actually different is if we use like a random vector number, let's try. Random vector, plug in the frame into the seed, the vector into this guy, and play back. We are actually using color that's being used in I think in the Japanese TV. I don't know, slightly strange, a little bit weird color. Sometimes give you black, maybe because of the random vector, but face. I think the luminance is controlled by this guy, and face and quadrature is controlling the color. Let's plug that in. Alt A, similar to HSV, unless we cut one of them and then paint. Now it's more subtle. I don't know, just a different way you can play around with the color. You can also, let's say, like I said, you can use this brightness, contrast, hue, saturation, value, level. Some of this, there is this hue, saturation, value, I realize, and then we can actually change the whole color using this method. Which is kind of cool. If you can get like psychedelic kind of effects. If we grab this data, let's get it from the top here. BPY Ops Paint Vertex Color HSV, and then change the hue. Just paste it into our script node. Randomly change hue using operators, using ops. Let's do that real quick. New input, and this should be it should be a float. Let's call it hue offset. Now hue offset, it's now it's gonna control the offset of our color. So that's also giving you an extra kind of something that triggers the hue change. And if you plug the frame into that guy, it's gonna keep changing if you change the frame number. Okay, so that's I guess that will close our kind of meditative experimentations. So let's duplicate another, let's make another teapot, and let's switch to full screen. And then now let's switch to Vertex Paint, and whoops, not that guy, this guy. Select this guy and switch to Vertex Paint, and then turn on Alt A. Now we kind of painting in it with a random color, and we don't know what we're gonna get, and it's keep changing color. And you can also render this out if you want. Switch to rendered, and this is cycle. It's building the BVH. I wonder if this is gonna work. Yeah, I think it's gonna work, but it's slower because the Teapot has a lot of resolutions. And let's stop it for now. You can do a little bit of painting while rendering, so it's a bit, yeah, it's a bit crazy, but also fun to work with. There we go. That's pretty much the live noding that we are doing today. Hope you like this kind of method. It's like I said, 3D painting in Blender is really cool. It's really easy and simple to teach to a person. You don't actually need to use animation node or scripting, but of course I want to kind of teach you about value and about color, about type of data, and then how you can control the data using frame. It's really basics. It's for beginner, but let me know if you have any questions. I will try to answer it. It's you know, just a way to we can access this Blender Python or BPY, and we can use the context or ops or directly accessing the data. I'm also still familiarizing myself with all this, but I guess it's getting better. Just because I'm kind of working with it every day, kind of making this live noding. It's something that I recommend you to do as well. Do your own live noding and kind of make a video, just a progress of what you're doing. Don't worry about whether people are gonna watch your video or something. It's for yourself. It's a kind of a way to keep track of what you're doing. And yeah, just get familiarized yourself with Python, Blender Python, and noding, and while having a little bit of fun, creative time, making random stuff. Yeah, so once again, it's how you can use the timeline. Kind of, I call it the Blender touch bar, but it's actually just a timeline. You can use the timeline to randomize the color of the brush and the size of the brush, and also to randomize all kind of things. You can even, if you feel like doing more, you can also randomize the mask here. I might, if I make another live noding video about something like this, I might use like a random alpha mask for the brush. Have like 100 different masks, and then start doing like a stamping. It's a fun. We'll see. Thanks again anyway for tuning into the live noding. I'll see you in the next video.